Again, good morning. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad to see you all here today in this lovely weather. You know, I was saying earlier, I don't know that we've ever had this much rain, but somebody said, well, you know, it's not the snow that we had last Wednesday. So good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Pam Darnell. I'm President and CEO of Family and Children's Place. For 135 years, we've been working very hard to prevent and stop child abuse, exploitation, and neglect here, leading efforts in Louisville and Southern Indiana. From providing food, necessities of life, including blankets and coal, to helping children who were abandoned on the streets with nowhere to live all the way back in 1883, to today providing best-in-class prevention and intervention services, our mission at Family and Children's Place has never veered. Safe, happy, and healthy families. But unfortunately, child abuse is an epidemic that is on the rise. And our United States of America is among the worst of developed nations because 5 children die every single day in our country as the result of child abuse and neglect. That's 1,825 children a year, or 61 classrooms of children that die as a result of child abuse and neglect. Last year, the number of children who were involved in child abuse and neglect reports in our country rose from 6.6 million children to 7.2 million children. Here in Kentucky, last year, 19 children died and 62 children nearly died as a result of child maltreatment, according to the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. In 2015, in Indiana, 77 children died as a result of child maltreatment. And you know what? These numbers, and knowing that every one of these injuries and every one of these deaths could have been wholly prevented, should be appalling to every one of us here today. One of those children was a 3-year-old toddler who suffered child abuse syndrome and suffered severe blunt force trauma over that child's very short 3-year life. These are real children. They are not just statistics. These are real children. Every day in our country, real children die every day as a result of child abuse and neglect. And unfortunately, some of those are right here in our own community. We know that today our community faces many very difficult challenges, from increasing violence, an alarming number of homicides, the growing opioid and drug epidemic that is really forcing and flooding our system with more children who are hurt by abuse and neglect. Our most vulnerable citizens, our precious children, are being left behind in growing numbers. In the past 4 years in Kentucky, the number of child abuse reports has risen by 55%. And in Indiana, in the past 10 years, the number of child abuse and neglect reports has risen by 90%. But there is hope. Family and Children's Place is committed to preventing and stopping child abuse and helping those families who are hurt to heal and find recovery. We've been at that work for 135 years, and we will continue far into the future. Last year alone, over 6,000 children and family members were helped by our best-in-class services. And way back from 1883, from our first year of our beginning to help kids and families, we estimate that we have served over 250,000 children and their families. But there are so many more who need our help. Children really are the innocent victims of child abuse. And too often when kids are hurt, they feel abandoned, they feel alone, they feel like they have nowhere to turn, and often they feel like no one will believe them anyway. So we must all be their guardians. And as a partner with the Kosair Child Abuse Movement to end child abuse by 2023, we at Family and Children's Place are doing everything we can to stop child abuse. But we know we can't do it alone. All of you are here, are wonderful partners in this phenomenal effort. So today, you've heard all these statistics and you've heard these things that hurt kids and families. We are asking you today to join us, join the Face It movement to be a true champion for children. Now, I want to introduce a very special guest. We are so honored to have our First Lady, Glenna Bevan, here with us today, and she wanted to blend in with the crowd right over here. So thank you, Ms. Bevan, for being here. Let's join in thanking her for her attendance today. Ms. Bevan knows very well the importance of raising happy and healthy children. She's a mom of 9 kids, so she knows this very well. But you know, she also makes time to advocate for others' children and supporting and ending child abuse and family violence. And she's making significant changes to the foster care and adoption system here in our Commonwealth. Ms. Bevan, thank you so much for being here today and for all that you do for our Commonwealth. Thank you so very much. Our next speaker is Senator Julie Rocky Adams. Since joining the Senate, Senator Adams has worked tirelessly to make sure that those who have not had a voice now have a voice. She has sponsored and supported many bills that support families and children, including her recent support of the Anti-Child Bride Bill, which directly stops exploitation of children. She also is advocating for folks who have mental health issues and for legislation and supports for women. So please join me in welcoming Senator Julie Rocky Adams.
Well, thank you very much. I am really honored to be here today for the kickoff of Prevent Child Abuse Month. And also, I noticed that the Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky Twitter account has this thing called a twibbon. And so I'm going to have somebody figure out how to put that twibbon on my Twitter account, because I think that's a great way for all of us here today to promote April as Child Abuse Awareness Month, Prevent Child Abuse Awareness Month. So I'm not very technologically advanced, but I am going to do that, and I encourage everybody else to do it too. Now, I just want y'all to know this is my 8th year in the legislature, and I have seen firsthand how our families are broken, and I've always made it a priority to stand up for our children in Kentucky and take proactive measures to prevent child abuse. Last year, I was proud to sponsor Senate Bill 236, which received unanimous and bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. Senate Bill 236 closes the gap in background checks of adults who work with children at schools, in our summer camps, and at the home, and in our home as babysitters or nannies. It was also a pleasure working with individuals from Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky and the Face It movement to work for passage of that legislation. Another bill, as Pam mentioned, that I sponsored this year is Senate Bill 48, which raises the legal marriage age for Kentuckians to 18. Kentucky currently has the 3rd highest rate of child marriages in the nation, and this is just wrong. We're talking about children marrying adults, and one supporter of the bill even went so far as to call it the legalized rape of children. Kentucky can do better. We've had both the Senate President sign it and the Speaker of the House sign it, and now it is sitting on the governor's desk waiting for his signature, and we're all excited because all signs indicate that he is going to sign that very soon, which is, I think, a big deal. And lastly, I just wanted to say I appreciate all the support that you all have given to this issue, and it shows your great dedication by being out here today. Please know that as a member of the General Assembly, I am always open to new ideas for people like you who are at the front lines, and you know where those loopholes are, and you know where those spaces are that need to be tightened up. please know you can always come to me, and I will be your champion in anything I can do to help close those loopholes and protect our Kentucky kids. So thank you again for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much, Senator Adams. And now it is my honor to introduce His Honor, the Mayor of Louisville, Greg Fischer.
Thank you, Pam. And Senator Julie Rocky Adams, I want to thank you again. You've demonstrated great leadership on these humanitarian issues, and they make our state a much better place. So great job to you. So I've been mayor for 7 years, and when we came into office, I said our city would be guided by three major values. A learning city, a city that's always learning, lifelong learning, a healthier city, and an even more compassionate city. And those are going to be the values that still guide everything that we do every day. And when you think about these values and you think about them in the context of child abuse and neglect, there's nothing more important than we can focus on. I would venture to say, you all are like me, when you read or hear of child abuse and some of the horrific detail that goes into that, and you put yourselves in the position of that child that's going through that abuse, your mind shuts down, your stomach starts churning, and you just say, this cannot be. How can we mobilize as a society to make sure that this just does not happen? Because it's not just that incident then when it takes place, it's also, we know then what happens after that incident, and how that abuse and neglect in the early life of a child can be a huge barrier to learning, to emotional attachment, have devastating health consequences through adulthood and beyond. We know that research over the past 20 years points just to how this damage results in things such as toxic stressors, abuse, neglect, family dysfunction. All this is not just taking place in childhood, but throughout someone's life, and then unfortunately can go on generation to generation. Not surprisingly, these adverse childhood experiences have been linked to such later life issues as drug abuse, alcoholism, as suicide, as people try to escape the demons that comes from this type of abuse. But perhaps less intuitive, research also indicates that adverse childhood experiences can also lead to such adult conditions as diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. It's not hard to imagine that when you think of that type of stress that is with you 24/7. The bottom line is we must do better. We must do everything in our power to give parents and caregivers the tools they need to raise children in a caring and loving environment. Today, as we gather to raise awareness of child abuse and neglect in our city, I think we can be hopeful that we have major leadership in our city that's leaning into these issues and have for quite some time. I want to applaud Pam's work and the work of Family and Children's Place that is 24/7 trying to make our city a better place. They've been doing that since 1883, building stronger families in Louisville and Southern Indiana through its child abuse prevention, intervention, and treatment programs. I want to thank our First Lady over here, Glenna, you and your husband, and the work that you all have been doing on foster care and improving the life of our foster children in our community is a huge asset to what's going on in our state. So thank you guys very much. Terry Brooks and the Kentucky Youth Advocates team is here that have this work as their lifeblood as well. Kosair is here. When you look around everywhere, Barbara Sexton Smith, our councilwoman, Commonwealth Attorney Tom Wine, these are folks that are all dedicated to this cause. So we must join hands even more and work harder to this. We have programs like Hands that reach out to young families to give new parents the skills they need to deal with frustrations that can lead to abuse. We know that if you were abused as a child and now you're a parent, you are operating what you think is normal behavior. It is not normal. These young and new parents need help. These programs give them skills to become loving and supportive parents, stimulating kids in a proper way so their brain development takes place as it should. And then we have other agencies in our city, such as our Department for Public Health and Wellness, that have been working with young families and children through programs like Healthy Start, Our Bounce Coalition is made up of our city's nonprofits, government, and academic organizations, is working with our schools on after-school programs to engage children in safe environments and build resilience in those kids and try to offset some of the lifelong impact of abuse and neglect and trauma and toxic stress. Our Compassionate Schools project with JCPS, 25 schools are participating. It's the largest project like this in the country. It's trying to repair the damage that has been done to some of our kids' brains. Yesterday, I announced additional policies for all Louisville Metro government programs involving children and teenagers to ensure, too, that your city government is doing all that we can to prevent abuse in our city programs and to make sure we appropriately and quickly respond to any allegation. So these are just a few of the ways that working together, we as a city can change lives of our children and work to ensure that they have the opportunity. And we must look at them as if they are our children. They're not somebody that we read about. We need to be as outraged as what happens to them as if it happened to our very own children. So I want to thank everybody. This is an impressive turnout here on kind of a blah day here in late March, but people have the passion. I want to thank our young people over here for you guys reminding us what's right here. Pam, to you and your team, great job. Let's keep her going. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you for all that you and your team do to help make sure that we are a better place for kids and families. Thank you for being here today. It's a pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, who is currently the Director of Louisville Metro Government's Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. He used to be on our staff at Family and Children's Place, so he knows very well the issues of child abuse and trauma and the impact that that has on our communities. We were sad when he left us, but we are so impressed with the work that he is doing as Director of the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. Please join me in welcoming Brashaad Abdulrahman.
Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? You know, it strikes me that this is the second time within maybe 4 or 5 days that committed, compassionate, caring folks have showed up to take a stand for our kids. So for me, it's just such a blessing and such an awesome showing of our community that we care, that we're going to show up, that we have young folks in the space who are doing the work, who are doing the lifting to make sure that we're making the right decisions. So, you know, my office, the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, really looks at reducing preventable deaths. We look at reducing homicide, suicide, overdoses, reducing violence in our community. And as Pam mentioned, we really need to be having this conversation about preventable death. How do we think differently? How do we make different investments so that we are stopping things that can be stopped? Pam shared that I used to work at Family and Children's Place, and I had an opportunity to do some work with a wonderful group of folks who are looking at making opportunities for parents and children to develop together in safe spaces. That we're providing treatment options for families on an individual and a family and a group level so that these family systems have an opportunity to heal and thrive and to be supported. We talked a little bit about the Bounce Coalition and other collectives in our city that are doing amazing work to really get ahead of this issue. And I think it really is a story of how do we get further upstream to see better outcomes for our children and families. And so it's just wonderful to see young folks, wonderful to see us all out here together. I do want to share that last week was National Youth Violence Prevention Week. We had over 33,000 students participating in this week, well over 150 organizations. PAL Coalition, there goes Tom, PAL Coalition was one of those organizations that came together to participate in a space that was cultivated and facilitated and coordinated by young people taking the lead. And so there's this remarkable and this tremendous momentum in our city and in our nation where young folks are stepping up and standing up and saying, we want to see something different happen. And we're going to hold adults accountable to make sure that something different happens. And I think it's a remarkable message that we have an opportunity as a community, as a city, as a state, as a country, we have an opportunity now in front of us to get out of the way and listen to them. So let us take advantage of these opportunities. Let us be bold and ambitious, and let's do the right thing. Let's make sure our young folks' voices are heard. Let's make sure that we're making the right investments in prevention, in intervention. It's the right thing to do. It's effective. And yes, it saves us tons and tons of money, but it's the right thing to do. And so thank you again. I've got to lift up our young folks again. Let's give them another round of applause, please, for being here and for leading the way. And we will continue to do everything in our power to support this work, to support Family and Children's Place, to support our coalitions that are doing this work. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Brashaad. Thank you so much, Brashaad, for your work and all that you guys are doing to help make sure that we here in our community have a better and a safer place to raise families. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who really is a true partner in our work. He and his department are tasked with protecting children and investigating when child abuse is alleged. But you know, for him, protecting children really is more than just a job. He's a friend, an advocate, and a real champion for children. Please join me in welcoming Louisville Metro Police Chief Steve Conrad.
Good morning, Pam. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Like the other speakers, it's amazing on a day like this to see such a great crowd, but I can't think of a more important issue for us to be out here together on. And Pam, I want to thank you for all the great work that happens at Family and Children's Place. We share space with them, with our Crimes Against Children's unit. I can't think of a more apt place for our detectives to be working those kinds of cases. So thank you for that. You know, it is a sad, sad fact that, you know, so many people in our community, so many young people, so many children suffer from abuse and neglect. And, you know, the thing that makes it so sad is this abuse and neglect often happens at the hands of the people who are supposed to love them, the people who are supposed to protect them. And I will share that as police officers, we see this happen all too often. And we do what we can to try to hold those abusers accountable. You know, the data shows us that every year here in Louisville, several hundred kids are physically abused. More than 100 kids are sexually abused, and over 2,000 every year are neglected. And what's truly sad is those are only the numbers that have been reported. We know that it is happening out there, and we have a duty to make sure that we do what we can to stop this abuse and this neglect. And I think what happens is that often people believe it may be happening, or they might suspect it, but they don't know how to go about reporting it. So it's important that people know how to make those reports. And I would start by sharing some of the signs of abuse. Does a child you know have an unexplained injury? Or when you hear the explanation, does it sound convincing? Is a child's behavior changing in some negative way? Or does a child seem uncared for? If you notice any of these signs, or if a child confides in you that they're suffering from some kind of abuse, don't ignore that cry for help. Pick up the phone and call 911, or call the state's child abuse hotline at 1-877-KYSAFE1. Intervention does work. We can make our kids safer. We need to work together to make sure that we always and quickly report suspected abuse, and that we do what we can to provide the families with children the support that they need to raise happy, healthy, caring children that don't have to worry about this kind of abuse in their lives. Thank you. And thanks.
Thank you so much, Chief Conrad, and thank you for all that you all do. And he mentioned the Crimes Against Children's unit that is co-located at our Kosair Charities Child Advocacy Center. It's my real pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is the president of Kosair Charities, Keith Inman. For many of you all here today representing agencies, and certainly for Family and Children's Place, Kosair Charities is the reason we are here. Without that support, we could not do the life-changing work that happens here in this community every day. So I'm so pleased to introduce and have here with us today several folks from Kosair Charities and to welcome Keith Inman to come and speak with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Everybody's speaking about the weather, but you know what? It's a great day. It's a great day that we're all together to fight child abuse. We don't need sun and warm. We just need to be together and be focused. And I'd like to tie something that Pam said earlier when she gave the statistics. Every one of those numbers was avoidable. It was avoidable. There was a red flag. Somebody saw something. And Chief, I was with a group the other day, and I gave them permission to be a nosy neighbor. I gave the whole crowd, a couple hundred people, the permission to be a nosy neighbor. So you might get a call that says, well, Keith said it was all right. But where a child is concerned, if you see something, do something. If you see something, do something, say something. So Chief, we've known each other since college. I'm sorry. Kosair Charities, since 1923, has been about one thing, and that's helping kids in need. And literally over that time, we've helped millions of kids and their families. And through the direction of our board of directors, and we have several of our board members here today, thank you. They have provided the leadership and the funds to help us do what we do. I have several staff members here as well, like for them to say thank you. These people come to work every day focused on one thing, helping kids and ending child abuse. Last year was a great year for us, but it started about 5 years ago when the board of Kosair Charities, working with Dr. Jerry Rabelais, came together to fight child abuse. We felt a bold statement needed to be made. And that statement was, by 2023, we're going to end child abuse. By 2023. That's a big goal and a big statement. But if you know Kosair Charities, that's the way we roll. We make big goals and big statements. Also at that time, we said we're going to provide $1 million a year to fight the battle. Well, let me assure you, we're spending much, much more than that. And I want to thank our board again for their focus on that. But last year, we saw 50% growth in participation in our FACE It partners. We now have over 46 statewide, and we're not going to be happy until we cover the entire state. We trained over 3,900 professionals in best practices and reached 39,000 of our kids. 39,000 of our kids. We distributed over 49,000 brochures, which is only 288% growth increase. And we're reaching well over 300,000 people with our social media platforms. But folks, it takes more than that. It's going to take each and every one of us. So again, Chief, if you see something, do something, say something. Pam, thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much, Keith, and for all the amazing work that Kosair Charities does for so many, not just here in our community, but across our state. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is really well known in Louisville, but he's also well known in Frankfurt as well. You know, I've seen him stalking legislators and working hard in committee meetings. He also works very hard leading Kentucky's Children's Advocacy Day at the Capitol. In his years as an educator and a principal, and now as the executive director of Kentucky Youth Advocates, he really is steadfast every day and working hard to make sure every child has every opportunity to succeed. Please join me in welcoming Terry Brooks, executive director of Kentucky Youth Advocates.
I really have just one job. The young people at Holy Trinity have told me that if I stretch this to 12:15, they get to go out to lunch instead of eating in the school cafeteria. So I'm going to try to deliver for you. Dante once said that the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who, in a time of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. He continued and said, and it's not sufficient just to be against things, just saying, well, I don't like the way things are going. We have an absolute moral responsibility to offer an alternative. 5 years ago, Kosair Charities made that decision to offer an ethical and moral alternative to accepting child abuse. And as Greg Fischer said, so many folks here, whether that's elected leaders like Tom or Barbara or himself, Senator Rocky Adams, the First Lady, the Governor, Secretary Brinkman, they are waging alternative issues in City Hall and in Frankfurt, and they are offering those kind of alternatives. It takes guts for Brashaad and Chief Conrad to try to provide safe neighborhoods in thoughtful rather than conventional ways. And we can't ignore the many grassroots partners who are here today. VOA, Centerstone, 4Cs, a myriad of groups that are participating with us and the charities in Face It. We have medical school representatives from both the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky here today, and we welcome their participation. We know that if we are going to tackle child abuse as a moral issue, if we're going to do more than say we don't simply like the way things are going, that it takes those public officials, it takes those grassroots folks, it takes professionals like the medical representatives here, and it also takes that philanthropic force like the charities to really turn the tide. We need to remember as we go into April to challenge not just ourselves, but to challenge everyone to remember that Dante phrase, because the hottest place in hell is reserved for those in a time of moral crisis who maintain their neutrality. Thank you.
Terry, thank you so much for those great, inspiring words. We appreciate you being here today. Thank you, Terry, First Lady Bevan, Senator Adams, Mayor Fischer, Brashaad, Chief Conrad, and Keith for being here with us today in this incredibly important day, again, to recognize April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Again, since 1883, we've been working hard to protect kids and families, and we will continue at it. But you know, our community really does have some of the highest rates of child abuse reports and confirmed. And when we fail to protect our kids in our community, we all suffer as a result of that. But we know that by working together, many of you all here today are partners in the Face It movement, and many couldn't be here today. But we know that by working together, that's how we really make a difference. So thank you so much for being here today. You know, usually we take a walk over the bridge at the end to signify our commitment both to Southern Indiana and to Louisville. So if you're one of those brave people, some actually walked over to get here. So thank you all for doing that. Some of you brave folks might want to take that walk as well. But if not today, maybe on a prettier day. So thank you all so much again for being here. We are so honored that you're here, and thank you for all that you do every day for our community. Thank you very much.